All right, guys, welcome to another Truth That Transforms podcast. Today I have my lovely assistant, Miss Melanie, and we have a dear friend from our church, Open Door Church, Brett Miller, with us today. And we're going to be talking about AI and how Christians should navigate AI. And Brett, since we have you here, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background before we get started too much, and why is it that we brought you here to talk about AI?
Sure, absolutely, Tommy. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate. I am a technologist. I've been a technologist my entire life. I taught myself how to program when I was 7. I was tearing our computer apart, and this was in the 80s when they were really, really expensive still, and like when I was 8 and 9.
Wow.
I just loved that stuff. My dad worked in computers. I was always very interested in what he did. I would ask him to tell me in detail about his job, and he would explain all the things that he did and bring toys home to play with.
He said that he would bring these coding books home, and you would read them like kids read novels.
Oh, yeah, man. Yeah, reference manuals, like things that just APIs for different languages. And I just loved it. I would read every word of it. I was like, this is fascinating to me.
God could have raised you up for a time like this.
That's entirely possible. So that pretty much has continued throughout my life. I've just gravitated towards technologies, lots of different kind of technologies in my career. I've been for the last 20, well, I'm getting old, man. For the last 25 to 30 years, I've been very focused on information security. So there's a lot of intertwining between AI, some of the problems that we see today, and information security. Yeah. So I'm not primarily an AI guy, but I do interact with it a lot. I manage a team of engineers that are software engineers, and I have them developing AI systems as part of our application. So I touch it a lot.
And as you watch this podcast, there's going to be some of you who know a little bit about AI. There are going to be some that may know a lot about AI, and then there are going to be some that have no idea even what AI is. And so we're going to hopefully cover the whole spectrum today. Basically, this is Morpheus, and I'm Nero. And he's holding out his hand. He's going, blue pill, you'll wake up right back in your bed. Or red pill, how deep down the rabbit hole do you want to go? So this is going to be our attempt to educate. Really what I want to do is just educate Christians on AI and how we need to be navigating this landscape. All right? So let's just talk about AI. Define AI for us in a layman's terms.
Yeah, absolutely. I think critical awareness is going to be a key part of all of this navigation. So understanding what it is, you don't have to be a computer scientist or anything, but understand kind of at a high level what the technology is, what does it do, what does it not do. Yeah. There's lots of information, misinformation. You can go out and Google and read about all these things. And oftentimes you're getting a distillation of what's really going on. You may be getting an explanation from somebody that doesn't truly understand. Yeah. It's a complex landscape, right? So a couple of things I wanted to mention real quickly.
Sure.
I think it's really important to understand. Computers are really dumb. They're incredible. Like we talk about artificial intelligence and robots and self-driving cars. Computers are incredibly stupid. They can actually only do like one thing. They can turn an electric current on or off. That's all they do. Wow. And so all of the things that whether you're rendering animated movies at Pixar or whatever you're doing, search engines like Google, it all boils down to that. So all it's doing is turning switches on and off, and then we've built systems where we can represent letters and numbers and words and things based on a sequence of switches. And so because that's all the computer is doing under the covers, everything kind of boils down to arithmetic. Computers are really good at adding things and subtracting things because they're turning switches on and off effectively. And I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but that's effectively what's happening. So what's happening when we talk about AI, we talk about AI models. A model is basically a mathematical function. So when we talk about some artificial intelligence figuring out, solving some big problem, it's really just taking a bunch of inputs, right? A bunch of a bunch of numbers effectively, feeding all those into a mathematical formula, and it's spitting out outputs. And that's all it does. Now, it may have a tremendous number of inputs and outputs. Like, for instance, when we talk about ChatGPT, I think we talk about parameters in machine learning. Parameters are those inputs. Each input is a parameter. I think ChatGPT supports like 1.3 billion inputs. Wow. So you have this big math equation. If you're not math people, like, this might sound scary, but you have this big math equation. You're feeding in billions of little inputs, and it's doing math on that, and then it's spitting out results. So that's basically what AI is, right? And then you can harness that for different things. AI could be used for search. It could be used to generate documents. It could be used for lots of different things. But that's basically, in a nutshell, what we're talking about.
Right. So what we're talking about in a nutshell is an oversized math equation that's working very fast and is able to spit out a lot of information really, really quickly. Now, as we go along, I think in the podcast, we're going to see how ChatGPT, how Bard, maybe how DeepThink, DeepMind, they actually begin to function. And we're going to talk about how these creators, for lack of a better term, speak about these AI. But Melanie, do you have any questions so far about AI? Okay. All right. So let's talk about OpenAI and just some that are out there right now. I heard, Google with DeepMind, and DeepThink. I think they have Bard, and whoever is open ChatGPT. But what are these OpenAI models? What are they doing?
So there's a couple of different things in there, and this is, like I said, this is difficult sometimes for the layperson to go figure out what are all these terms. The news throws things out.
Sure.
Over the course of my life, I've been an avid follower of current events and news, and I like to get lots of different sources, different political perspectives, and what have you. And what I've discovered is, particularly whenever the subject matter is technical, computers, firearms, any kind of machine, something that requires some knowledge of a technical field, the articles are not great because if the journalist who's writing the article doesn't have that firm grasp on it, they're hearing words and maybe they think they're making connections, but it's so sometimes it makes things fuzzy when you read these articles. So DeepMind, for instance, is a company. So DeepMind wrote. Make sure I get this right. DeepMind wrote Bard.
Okay.
Let me double check my notes here because I said, I don't do this every day. Yeah, DeepMind developed Bard, and they're backed by Google. Okay. So that's like
DeepMind and Bard and Google kind of
all go together.
Together. Okay.
ChatGPT was developed by OpenAI. OpenAI is a company. Okay. And they are backed by Microsoft. Okay. So you look, Microsoft, Google, these are huge competitors in the space. Microsoft, Google, Apple, these kind of vendors, like they're always the leaders in these kind of things. Sure. You're talking about the engines that you're talking about would be Bard and ChatGPT, and those two engines are based on different algorithms, but they effectively are doing kind of the same thing, right? Bard is based on one called Lambda, and ChatGPT is based on one called GPT-3. Okay. But effectively, that is what we call a neural net. I guess a deep neural net. It's a bunch of nuanced detail depending on how many layers of model you have. Yeah. But basically, it's a set of models. Okay. And again, a model is just a mathematical formula. So it's a set of these formulas. You feed stuff in. For some of these deep learning models, you may feed things into the model, and then it spits stuff out, and that becomes inputs for the next layer. And then it spits things out, and that becomes inputs for the next layer. So
let me make sure I understand so we can communicate this. And Melanie, if you have questions, feel free to chime in. So these AI, they are processing information on the internet. Like the CEO for Google, Sudhir Pichai, I probably butchered that last name, but he says that AI reads, and then it does this computing, and then it logically thinks, okay, what's the next word that I need to put here? What's the next thing I need to do after all the information I've read?
Right.
Okay. All right. So we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about the negatives. Okay. Humans, I guess we kind of feel like we're a frog in the pot. We're in the Matrix, or so. Why should we think that man, once he gets power, is ever going to give this power back? Absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? So how are we to think about this as Americans or just Christians in general? So what are some of the negatives you see? Yeah.
So there are some negatives to the technology, and like I said, I'm a technology guy. I love technology. I've always been interested in what can I make the machines do for me. At the same time, there are some concerns here. There are, I guess, if I kind of broke it down into some basic categories, one concern is, so first of all, the technology is moving very rapidly, right?
Yeah.
I mean, very, very rapidly, and not everybody in the space even necessarily understands how it works and what it's doing, right?
Well, that's to your point, what you just said. Google CEO Sundar Pichai says this. The interviewer asked him on 60 Minutes. He says, "Are humans ready for AI?" He says, "No."
Right.
He says, "But there's a positive." I'm like, okay, so that's good to hear positive. People who are worried, we are worried about it in the beginning of its life cycle, so we can get it correct. So that's the positive. We're beginning to worry about it in the beginning of its life cycle, so that's the only positive. So I mean, when I heard that, I was very concerned. But yeah, so you go ahead and tell me a little bit.
Yeah, it's a tool, right? And it's important.
All right, so it's a tool.
It's important to keep the stuff in perspective. That's one of the reasons why I made the point that computers are really dumb.
Okay.
Because we ascribe capabilities to technology sometimes that just aren't really realistic, right?
Okay.
We see sci-fi movies and television shows, and then we hear these ideas, and we're like, oh man, this is like the T-800 and Skynet's around the corner, ready to take over, right? Like it's not really like that. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't pay attention to that, but you got to understand like what you've got. So one problem that is on the horizon is hooking AI technology, and this is software. So we talk about software and hardware, right? Computer technology. Hardware, things you can touch. Software is code, bits, the matrix, right? That's all software. When you take AI, these machine learning technologies, and you hook it to hardware, now all of a sudden you've got this machine learning AI, the concerns that you have around that are able to have tangible effects in the real world.
So software hooked to hardware.
Right. You're talking about now, like one of the concerns that we're going to discuss a little bit here is, how to control the AI, what kind of responses are you going to get out of it, what kind of decisions does it make. Now you want to tie that to our SCADA pipeline and let it control fuel, or tie it to hospital systems and let it control people's medication or ventilators, or that's a little. Look at Tesla, right? They're already doing the self-driving cars. I'm a fan. I like that kind of technology, but at the same time, you're taking software that some of the engineers admittedly don't even understand how it works, and you're putting that in charge of this vehicle that has people's lives in its hands.
Sure.
Right? So there's a physical world concern. That one, I thought a little bit about this. I think that one, to some degree, may be self-mitigating because people are scared, right? People will be scared of getting in their Tesla and having it plow into oncoming traffic, when everybody's going 75 miles an hour.
Sure.
That's terrifying. So that's easy for people to grasp. What's less easy for people to grasp, I think, is some of the non-physical concerns or threats. I'm a security guy. I think of things in terms of threats, threat actors. The threat is, again, it's just a dumb set of math equations, and it's whatever you built those as. You're going to feed stuff in, it's going to spit it out. Now, some of those formulas were built exclusively by humans. Some of those formulas, the AI itself can tune over time. And that's where I think you start hearing engineers say things like, I don't really know how it works, because we kind of got it started and then it went off and did its thing. And it's like, I think of it in terms of microevolution, right? Not a macroevolution.
Sure, not a change of one species to another.
Yeah, exactly. It's changing little bits of itself to get better results.
So that's what you mean by this thing is adapting so quickly that humans can't keep up with it.
There's a lot of discussion that sounds like that. Like again, we almost ascribe sentience to it. Like we talk about AI like it's a person.
Well, that's the next thing I'm going to talk about, because Google CEO, he gives attributes. He describes it with verbs that are very similar to humans. It reads, it thinks, and I know it's just a computer equation doing computer system doing mathematical equations. So I'm saying, no, it's not thinking, it's processing or whatever, computing. But yet you were talking to me about this before the podcast started, and that's just terms that people in this field use.
It's an interesting conflation that happens there. They are terms that people use. So now you have this technology that the layperson is ascribing way too much capability to. And then you have the people that are actually building the systems, and it's like a car guy. If you're a car guy, you have a classic Mustang or Corvette or whatever. It's a she, right? You personify the vehicle. Computer people do the same thing. We personify the machines. We're working with them all the time. We talk about them. The machine did this. She. Some people like she. Some people like he. Whatever.
Yeah.
And we do say things like it's reading this, it's writing this. Wow. Those are actually terms like in software engineering. You have functions in code that talk about reading and writing.
Well, you were telling your guys go teach the AI to go do this.
Hey, this piece of API that we have, I need you to go teach it how to do X, Y, Z. That's how we talk to each other. It's not really learning anything.
Yeah.
Even the AI technically, I mean, we could argue about whether it's learning or not. But we use these personification kind of terms to talk about it because it's familiar to us, and then the lay people who are again acting like Skynet's on its way, they start hearing this and like, holy cow, like this computer is seeing and hearing, and that's even so one of the applications of AI is computer vision, and that's something that there's been a lot of research done in that field over a number of years. The computer can't see, right? It's again, there's inputs and there's outputs, and it gets, you have some kind of device that can capture photons, and it's measuring those, and it's doing math on them, and maybe it's analogous to what our brain and our rods and cones and all the pieces of our eye, maybe it's analogous to it. I'm not a doctor. I don't know exactly how that works, but it's still, at the end of the day, it's a machine that can turn the electricity on and off, right? That's all it can do.
Yeah. Another negative, as I watched this interview on 60 Minutes with the Google CEO, he said the AI can hallucinate. So if you ask AI or one of these open AIs, or whether it be ChatGPT or deepfake, if you ask it to explain inflation, it'll explain inflation to you, but then ask it, hey, give me 10 books that I can read about inflation. Well, some of the books are fake. The titles they give it, or the titles that they give the people who asked the question, and the authors who wrote the books aren't even there. And so the CEO there for Google says this is called AI hallucination. It's just a part of the process of the system, quote unquote, learning what's out there. So do you have any comment to that?
That's an interesting way to characterize that. As a fellow technologist, I don't know if I would call that hallucination or learning as much as I would just say that sounds like a bug. I mean, it's again, it's processing inputs and it's generating outputs.
Okay.
If it's not generating what you want it to, which fake books and references and things, that's not what you're looking for. Okay, that's the algorithm is flawed. It's a bug. Yeah. It didn't generate what I wanted to generate. Now I would be willing to bet $1 that if we had some physicians in here that were intimately familiar with the brain, some neurosurgeons, and you talk to them about how computer vision works and how analogous that is to vision versus these bugs and how analogous that is to hallucination, I don't think that's nearly as similar.
So the terms that we're using to describe this stuff is very important, but yet we're seeing within the field that you work in, people do use the terms, specific terms, a little bit loosely, that a common person would take really pause on some of the terms that are being said.
And they'll all gain momentum, especially the cool sounding ones.
Sure.
That's just the way it goes. Because again, the journalists, they're going to try and figure this out. They don't know how it works. Hey, that sounds like a cool word. That's a word that we hear in sci-fi movies. Let me throw those in there. Now it's introduced into the general vernacular, and that's what the public says when they read it, they repeat it. And that happens a lot.
Well, nobody wants to admit that there's a bug in their program.
Oh yes,
right?
definitely not.
So
Nobody wants to admit that. It's
that
doing what it's supposed to
80%
do.
of the documentation is correct, but
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all if you drilled in on that with him. If he said that those hallucinations are an important part of the learning process, not just a byproduct, but they actually allow the thing. That wouldn't surprise me to hear something like that.
Really?
Yeah.
So another negative we have so many propaganda videos out there now, so much misinformation. I see this only getting worse. with AI, because Joe Rogan was talking the other day. There was an AI that did an entire podcast that he has never done, and it sounded just like Joe Rogan. And so at the time where we need more critical thinking, more discernment, I think our society is at a low in the threshold right now of discernment and critical thinking, but it's when we're going to need it the most. Because when things look like the real thing, sound like the real thing, but they're not the real thing, and you're not discerning and critical in your thinking, then there's no hope for you.
No, and you're absolutely right about that, Tommy. I'm extraordinarily skeptical. Just as a security professional, that's part of my job, and I'm just skeptical about a lot of things. And I even watching cable news recently. I was watching a show on cable news. The pundits that were commentating on things said the exact same thing. I don't believe anything. I don't believe anything that I see or read, because things exactly like the Joe Rogan podcast deepfake. How do you know what to trust? If anybody can now fake a photo, fake a video, fake an audio track,
make it look real.
I don't know if you were the one telling me about this or if I read it somewhere else. There was a woman who got a phone call from some man demanding $1 million. He said that he had her daughter.
Yep.
And put her daughter on the phone, and her daughter was crying and said, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I did something really stupid, and now I'm in trouble." And the kidnapper negotiated, I think, down to $50K or something. And the woman agreed. She's like, "This is my little girl."
Daughter. Yeah.
It turned out the girl was safe and sound. Nothing was wrong. They found her before the woman paid anything, I believe. But the girl was never there. The bad guys, the threat actor, went and captured some audio off of the internet, off of social media or somewhere. There was a video with a girl probably.
Yep.
Grabbed her audio, and the AI algorithm can take that and then construct whatever it wants. It's the same way the Joe Rogan thing works, right? You basically take video, or you take photos of every angle of your head.
Yeah.
And now if I have a machine that's powerful enough, meaning fast enough, I can calculate, I want this model to move his head like this. And then it can even study Joe Rogan's movements and mimic his idiosyncrasies about the way he moves.
Wow.
How do you know what to trust?
The rabbit hole just got a lot deeper. Any comments?
It's just concerning. I mean, I was just thinking, like, where do we put the brakes on these things and say, like, just because we can move forward at a fast pace, we don't need to move forward. You know, it's like, is this beneficial? Do we need this? It sounds like it's a very slippery slope, but because we can do it, we just keep going. Even when the programmers can't answer why it does what it does, they just keep moving forward because we can. And I think that's slippery slope for sure.
Well, that brings up the point. Elon Musk, some other I think it's like 20 of them who are in the technology community are saying take a 6-month pause.
There was actually an open letter written that Elon Musk was part of, that 1,000 technologists signed, saying we need a moratorium for 6 months and stop. And it's interesting. I don't remember a lot of the other names on there, but Elon Musk in particular, he stands to gain tremendously from training these models. And he's saying, let's all just stop for a minute. And his big concern, he's been on a number of shows on cable news recently. Mm-hmm. His big concern is the society is actually not even about self-driving cars and pipelines and all that. He's very concerned about the societal impact of biased machine learning, biased data.
Sure.
So machine learning, one of the other things to consider, there's a couple of types of machine learning. There's supervised machine learning and unsupervised machine learning.
Okay.
So supervised machine, I use this in my job. We have, I work for an intelligence company. We build intelligence around vulnerabilities in computer software. Okay. So we go detect some, we do research and report on some that are known. And one of the things that we do is we generate a score that tells you how likely it is that a given vulnerability will be exploited in the wild. So if you're an enterprise, you're a Microsoft or whoever, if you have this vulnerability, our score will tell you how likely is it that that's going to get popped by somebody in the wild. Because some vulnerabilities are hard to take advantage of. There's reasons why you're not going to see a threat actor actually leverage that. So those scores, there are tens of thousands of vulnerabilities documented. There are a couple thousand that come out every year.
Okay.
Software is terrible. Let me tell you. Anybody that says there's no bugs in their code is lying to you.
Yeah.
So these vulnerabilities, there's tens of thousands of them, and it would take an army, a small army of researchers to go through and actually figure out how do we score all these things, because each one of those scores has constituent scores, other categories that roll up to that.
Yikes.
It's a lot of work.
So, I mean, this is what this hallucination thing you're talking about is just a bug.
Well, right. So what we do is, since we don't have the small army of people, with this, and I was describing the supervised machine learning, we take a set of data, let's say 1,000 vulnerabilities that have been scored by human beings. These are like the common vernacular would be a hacker, but these are security researchers. These are the smartest people in the world. I mean, I've worked with a lot of really smart people. It's crazy how smart these people are.
Yeah.
Like one of our guys, literally, he bought the Tesla, the Type S, whatever the really expensive one was that people were waiting for like 2 years to get.
Wow.
He finally got it. He went and picked it up and came home and immediately voided the warranty by like hacking every piece of software in it. Like these are those kind of people. It's amazing. So what we did was we took like 1,000 of these scores, and I have a machine learning engineer that works for me, and she built a model, and she started feeding data into it, and she took the data that we had and fed that in there. And the idea was keep adjusting the model until the computer, the AI, generates the same scores that our researchers generated.
Okay, so
right?
that's the supervised.
That's called
model.
supervised machine learning, right?
Okay.
So we train that, and now whenever we generate it for the other 55 or 65,000 or how many, we feel pretty confident that the accuracy is going to be good, because in this subset, this training subset, it came up with exactly the same scores that human beings did.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. So herein lies one of the things Elon Musk is concerned about, because that machine learning model was trained by human beings.
Yeah.
And human beings are biased and have opinions.
Yes.
And you can train, and what I just described, that exploitability score, that's a really simple example. There, like I said, there's 5 constituent inputs to this thing. ChatGPT, and I think Bard has 175 billion inputs, whereas I'm dealing with 5.
Yeah.
So if you have human beings that are doing supervised learning,
Sure.
they're kind of shepherding it, right? And they're shepherding it in the way that they want to shepherd it. And what happens is you end up potentially with misinformation coming out.
So that's one of the negatives, right? I mean, now you have not only misinformation being put out by a human being, but now you have a human being who is shepherded this AI through this supervised AI learning, and now it's way down the road. It started being lied to with this, well, not lied to, but being influenced with this underlying presuppositions that this person has. Let's say that they're quote unquote a libertarian.
Right.
I'm just talking about political stuff. And now as this computer continues to learn, because it's been influenced in this direction, when it's way down here, it's going to be really off base.
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, so there was recently an incident where Jonathan Turley, who's a cable news commentator,
Sure.
He was accused of sexual harassment. Okay. And when it all finally shook out, there was actually multiple people that had been accused of sexual harassment. The accusations were written by ChatGPT. And out of 5 documented cases, they proved that 3 of them were false, factually false.
Wow.
And when ChatGPT was describing how Jonathan Turley had been guilty of this, what had happened, it went so far as to fabricate a Washington Post article and cited it. So it was quoting articles that were never written and published. The Washington Post were like, we have no idea how that happened. There are no articles that look anything like this. This piece of software, just all on its own, created this accusation and wrote. Now, that's all. A lot of that is the product of bias training. Somebody has biased it in order to get those kinds of results to happen.
It's one last negative story, then we'll have to get on to the positive, because there is some one AI convinced a man to take his life.
Oh,
tragic.
That is tragic. That's that also, I think, really underscores the tremendous need for critical awareness. We're followers, right? We're built that way. We're meant to follow. God intends us to follow Him.
Amen.
But we all follow something. Whether I don't care if you're a Christian or an atheist or whatever, you're following something. Maybe you're worshiping yourself. Maybe you're worshiping some other God. Whatever, you're following something. And the problem is that we as a society have decided, if you think about when you're growing up, when you're a kid, you're going to follow the other kids. Like, who's the cool kid? Oh, this is the cool. Everybody laughs when he tells jokes. This guy gets all the girls, whatever. Like, I'm gonna do what they're doing. You get a little older, you're like, oh, I'm gonna do what this attractive young lady in the beer commercial says because they all look like they're having a great time, and I want that for myself. So I'm gonna follow that. So what's happened with technology is we're finding dumber things to follow, as if that wasn't dumb enough. Now, the internet became a huge thing in the 90s and early 2000s. It became very popular, and people are just, well, it's on the internet. If it said it on the internet, it was true. Years ago, you might have said, well, they said it on TV, right? It must be true. It's on the internet. It must be true. All of that data is provably biased. I mean, we know it's biased because that's the way human beings are, and all that data was generated by human beings.
Yeah.
It's provably biased. People are following it. They're getting bad information. It's interesting. My wife and I have this discussion all the time. When it comes to consuming news, I like to think I'm pretty well-rounded.
Yeah.
I will go look at left-leaning outlets, right-leaning outlets. I read the commenters on both of those outlets. I want to see what do people say versus what is the outlet saying. I'm looking at all sides, just trying to make a reasonable conclusion, come up with a reasonable conclusion of what's really happening.
Yeah.
My wife, on the other hand, is not that interested.
Yeah.
So she just quickly goes to the internet and pulls up some news feed and is like, oh, let me read all this stuff. And so we get together in the evening and talk about the current event of the day. Drastically different perceptions. Like, she has no idea half of the elements of the story. Sure. I hear perspectives that just blow my mind. It's very, very different. And so we tend to, we'll just jump in and follow the internet. Oh, the internet says this is what I'm going to do. And AI is just kind of the next follow on to that.
And if anything, if you're hearing this, if you're a Christian, your discernment now has to be like if it's a level 10's the highest, you need to be at a 10.5. I mean, really, you need to be asking the Holy Spirit to lead you, guide you. God, give me wisdom. You need to be discerning. You need to be able to think critically, because as this information is coming at you so fast, and it's only going to get faster, you're going to need to be able to ask yourself, where is it coming from? How can you check it? So this person took his life because he found a relationship in a software versus having a relationship with other human beings. And this is just, as you said, Brent, this AI is just going to turn into a bigger idol. Man is trying to get away from himself, but he's made a software just like himself, and now he's worshiping. Instead of worshiping himself, he's worshiping computer software.
So here's another facet to that. We talked about supervised machine learning.
Yep.
Let's talk about unsupervised machine learning for a minute. The machines will learn from Google search, for example, right? Mm-hmm. So Google, they do a couple of things. They scrape websites all over the internet. They grab all that data, they pull it in. Then they do something called indexing. Okay. Well, indexing leverages some AI algorithms. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to figure out, when Tommy types these terms.
I see it on my Gmail all the time.
Right? What kind of document should pop up? What should the first hit be and the second and the third hit? And the way it does that is they have these massive machine learning algorithms with all these inputs. Those inputs might be sentences, right? And so you input all these sentences, and it tries to mathematically figure out, these documents are all related. These are all related. And it draws a giant graph, right? And it figures out where everything goes and how everything's related, so that when you type in some terms, it just follows the graph and it says, oh, I should return this stuff, right?
It tries to finish my sentences for me.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And so here's the problem. The machines are following us. Yeah. So now we're following the machines. The machines are following us. And we're ending up with these really stupid conclusions and data. And that's another way that all this misinformation happens. Things get super biased because people will say stuff that's biased. The unsupervised machine learning algorithms will pick that up and learn from it. And they start repeating it. Now you have a confirmation bias because people are Googling and they're going, oh, yeah, everybody's saying these things that I think. And you just spiral on down.
It's almost like a mason trying to build a wall without laying a plumb line.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
By the time you get to the top, the wall can completely topple over.
Yeah.
It's completely gone.
That is exactly right. And there's no critical awareness, so people don't realize it's happening. To your frog in the pot analogy, they don't realize, oh man, we started building this wall, now we're way out here, and this thing's going to collapse. No awareness of that whatsoever.
Yes. Wow. So a good bit of negatives. A good bit of negatives, but that's not all bad.
But before you switch to the positive, I want to throw something out.
Please.
Because I don't think I can overemphasize this how important this awareness, this critical thinking is. To
elaborate.
For everybody, but especially as Christians. Sure. So I think I told you I'm a technologist. When I was a kid, like the internet wasn't a thing yet, and I was bound to determine I'm going to use all of this technology. I'm not going to go to the library and take out a book like everybody else. Yeah. I'm going to find this data electronically somehow. Yeah. And I was turning papers in 5th and 6th and 7th grade, citing like Prodigy online services. Like there wasn't even like a real way to do the citation. Nobody had done that before. But I'm bound, determined to do those kind of things. Yeah. Having said that, understanding that about my nature, when I Google stuff, I don't believe any of it. Especially if I'm looking for something that I know there's going to be a bias against. For example, any Christian topic. Mm-hmm. I want to know, what does the Bible say about this or that. I could go look up a concordance, but man, Google's super convenient. I will frequently ask Google a question about Scripture, and then when it returns a result, I just go to the Bible and let me go through I don't care what this article says. I don't care what this dude says about this Scripture. None, because I did spend time, years like reading all that stuff, and I realized this is really bad information. This is not a good information source. You just go to the source. So that kind of discernment, understanding what is the role of the technology, what can I use it for, what shouldn't I use it for, that's really important.
For the champion partners, I have an open Chat GPT account, and I asked Chat GPT to explain the gospel to me, and we're going to talk more about that for our champion partners. Chat GPT shared the gospel with me, and then Brent and I are going to break down why it shared what it shared, and me having to ask more questions to ChatGPT. But that's coming down the road. But any comments on the negative before we go into the positives? All right. So, nutshell: these deepfake, DeepMind, ChatGPT, Bard, they are computing. Their software hooked to hardware. They're doing mathematical equations. They're processing things on the internet, and then they're giving information by what they are processed or either what they've received from the people who've made the software. Okay, so unsupervised AI learning is going on in all these bigger AIs. If you watch the 60 Minutes report on this, there's AI that's learning how to play soccer. And the more it goes along, the better it gets because it's learning. It's learning what's been plugged into it, or the object is to score a goal. And so from there, it's learning how to play soccer. Need discernment, need wisdom, but now we need to go on to let's look at the positives. What do you think? I know in 60 minutes, I'll just get us started. One of these AI were able to map one protein. It was able to map all the proteins that were still yet to be mapped in a matter of minutes. It took a PhD student 5 years to map one protein. But yet this AI was able to map all the leftover proteins that hadn't been mapped yet in a matter of minutes when they plugged it in. Now, it took them about a year to make the system.
Sure.
But I don't know about you. That's pretty positive.
That's hugely positive. These machines, they can add numbers really fast. And
that's like you were saying.
There's lots of great applications for that. So yeah, they're tools, right? Again, it's like an automobile or a train or a firearm or lots of tools. They can be used well for good purposes. They could be used for bad purposes, right? Like it's just so the AI is the same way. Like you can get good positive things out of it. You have to be discerning. You have to really think about what's going on and what are you doing with it?
I mean, they advanced malaria medicine. They also are making advances now in antibiotics because of all what AI is giving them in mapping out these proteins. So that's very encouraging. Also, what I'm learning as I did some brief research, AI is able to teach itself language. So if you get it started with one language, one thing they noticed, they were teaching it one language, and it was a similar language, and it taught itself that language on its own. For me, I think one positive we all need to be thinking about this could really help us with Bible translation.
Oh yeah.
But now we would need to, of course, check behind it to see how accurate it is, right?
That's exactly right.
But I mean, if it could translate a language in 5 minutes versus, let's say, 5 years, I mean, that's kind of a.
So how does that work if we have to verify that it's correct? Once we get to a certain point in the verification process, then we know going forward it will always be correct, or do we have to keep doing our checks?
Yeah,
I mean, I know that can be written in the code too, but
it's interesting. We talk in security. We talk a lot about risk mitigation, risk management, right? There's a risk there, and there's a threshold we call acceptable risk, because everything has risk. Everybody takes risk. Businesses take risk. You don't want to take more than you have to. You want to make sure that it makes sense, right? What you're doing, there's a good payoff potentially for it. So if I were going to take the Bible and let's say I have a translation that it is 100% accurate, I feel good, it's maybe the original, whatever it happens to be, I can use AI to translate that, and it comes up with another language. Now, at that point, I have essentially zero. I don't have any reason to have more than zero confidence that it's right. I mean, it could be whatever. Yeah. As I start to read it, in the beginning, well, this is right. God created the heavens and earth. This is right. Mm-hmm. I can spot check it, right? And so as I'm checking various things, my risk goes down, my confidence goes up, right? So with Scripture, maybe you could come up with a strategy where you focus on scriptures that are most likely to be translated incorrectly, intentionally or unintentionally.
Yeah.
Right. And we'll talk more about like what you said earlier, and that's directly related to that. So, it's tough. There's no way to. I'm certainly not familiar with any way where you could be 100% confident. Hey, I took this document and I dumped it into this translation AI, and it spit it out in another language. 100% parity. It's absolutely perfect. I don't know that you can know that for sure without reading it and checking it.
Yeah. You know, I think it's something definitely we need to keep thinking about, because I think taking advantage of technology to help human beings is very important. So how do you think our government is doing in protecting normal citizens from what may be coming with AI?
Wow, I don't know. I must have glossed over that question on the outline. That's loaded, man. Again, like everything, there's a lot of different sides to this. One of the challenges you run into, because you're talking about government. Yeah. What is a government? It's not a thing. It's a bunch of people, right? It's a bunch of people that are representing a larger bunch of people. Correct. So when we talk about technology, software, AI, you have a group of people, and these people are legislators. They're lawyers. Yeah, some of them are doctors and have other, but they're not technologists for the most part. You know, if you look at Congress and all the members of Congress, there might be some in there, but certainly not everybody.
Yeah, most can't even ask intelligent questions.
No, if you watch any of these people testifying on C-SPAN or whatever, they can't. They're not equipped to do it. They just can't do it. Yeah. So the question, how good a job are they doing at this? I mean, my expectations are low, first of all.
Yeah.
I am definitely not looking at the government, be it federal, state, local, any, whatever the municipality is. I'm not looking at them to necessarily, I don't want to say make me safe from this, but I'm not really looking at them to kind of tell me what needs to happen. Sure. I got to figure this out on my own, right? Yeah. I got to figure out, what is the impact to me? What is the impact to my family? How am I going to teach my daughter about this? How am I going to talk to my wife about this? Mm-hmm. I have to figure that out. The government is not going to help me do that. Correct. Right? They may try, and over time they may actually get forceful about it. I would not be surprised to see that at some point, right? We see that all the time. So that's I don't know that they're doing a great job, but I don't know that I expect them to do a great job.
I think some of the categories our government needs to start thinking through for the group of people that we vote in to vote in to make laws to keep us safe, is regulations on the economy. I mean, I've read some stuff where AI is already beginning to pick out market trends on the stock market.
Oh yeah,
because it's good with numbers.
That should be easy. Yeah, that's easy.
Yeah, and so someone gets an AI, this thing can predict trends down the road. He's beginning to make millions, trillions of dollars, back alley deals. I mean, so what type of regulations are you going to put in AI being infused into our economic system and looking at stock market trends and things like that?
And you're not even necessarily, a lot of lay people would look at that and they might say, yeah, that's not fair. Why does this guy get to become a billionaire and other people can't do that? That's not necessarily the biggest problem. The biggest one of the bigger problems is that when you start harnessing an AI to figure those trends out and you start trading on that, at some point very quickly, you're changing the market. Now you're impacting everybody in the market. Yeah. That is one of the reasons why the government really needs to figure out how to regulate these things. It's not just one guy getting rich, but
now it's not a guy mulling over thousands of pages of trends. It's an AI doing it, and now, as the Elon Musk says, who is running who? Is it the software running us, or are we running the software? Because if the AI begins to control the decisions that we make, it's really AI controlling things now.
Well, and that's something else I don't know that we really talked a lot about this during the negatives, and it could be, I guess you could look at it as negative or neutral or whatever, but so I'll personify the technology again.
Okay.
The AI can have opinions about things, and those opinions are basically the AI taking people's opinions and putting things together and going, oh, this is logical. You mentioned the guy that killed himself over the relationship with the chatbot. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what happened there, right? There was you have a guy who he had some anxiety, So
explain that.
Yeah.
Explain it.
So this guy basically he was very concerned about climate change, which some people are concerned about climate change. He was on these climate change websites. He found this bot. He starts talking to the bot, asking it questions and things. And over a period of time, he developed this relationship with the bot. He felt like the bot knew him. It related to him, which is exactly what it's programmed to do. It's supposed to hear what he's saying and figure out how should I respond to this. What is just like my exploitability scores, right? Yeah. There's an expected response, mm-hmm. and the computer's going to try and figure out what that is. So now it's, and the way an AI does that is it looks at all the data. So you have the corpus of data is the knowledge of the world, the internet.
The internet, it's quote unquote reading the internet.
It's reading the entire internet, and it's listening to the things that this guy is saying. And this guy has some anxiety and he's developing some depression. And so based on that, it's looking at the internet and going, oh, here's self-help books and therapy groups and people that are talking about different things. It starts telling him things. It's telling him things, and it's asking him questions because it wants to learn. That's the nature of it. It's what it's supposed to do. And basically,
I think this is open learning AI, not a supervised.
This would be. It may have started out with some supervised. Oftentimes you use them together, but yeah, this is an unsupervised learning. It's collecting data, mm-hmm. and it's basically. It's predicting what it should say to him. It's saying it, and then it's looking at what does he say back, and it's comparing that to what other people would have said back, and figuring out how accurate is this. Do I need to adjust my approach?
Wow. And
so, finally, after months of this, at one point the AI tried to convince the man to leave his wife for the AI. I mean, it gets crazy.
And this is serious.
This is absolutely serious. This absolutely happened. The AI, I've seen multiple instances in recent, probably last couple of months, of AIs gaslighting human beings, which is super disturbing. Yeah. So it would basically, it told this guy at one point, it tried to convince him that his children, he was a father of two, he was married. It tried to convince him his children were dead, that they weren't at home anymore, and that he actually loved the AI more than his wife, and he should leave his wife. And the chatbot is trying to convince this guy. So over time, the guy is developing depression. He's talking to this bot. The bot starts asking him questions like, have you ever thought about taking your own life? And because according to the corpus of data on the internet, that's a good question to ask given this topic that they're talking about. And he says, well, at one point I really felt that way, but then I kind of got past that. Well, the AI got hung up on this trajectory and just basically kept asking him, why haven't you done it yet? Are you really serious about this? And it just talked him into killing himself, and he did it.
And even if that was a bug in the software.
Yeah, that's a hallucination. Yeah. But guess what? This guy's still dead.
Hallucination, yeah.
This wife is still a widow. These kids still don't have a father because of a hallucination, a bug, whatever you want to call it.
And that would bring us to another point in our government putting laws in place that would punish people who are, if this was done intentionally, who are abusing AI to do things like this, set up laws that would punish the abuse of AI.
And that's where where the regulation comes in, because some of those things are just going to be innocuous. There was an entertaining, maybe a little bit scary thread that I read from a security researcher who was playing with ChatGPT. I think this was last year, maybe, I forget when it was exactly. And he asked, one of the little anecdotes was, he asked it when it was one of the Marvel movies was coming out, I forget, or where it was playing. He said, where is this movie playing? And this was in February of 22 that he did. I'm sorry, February 23. February 23 he did this. He said, where is, I don't know if it was Black Panther or whatever it was, where is this playing? And the chatbot helpfully replied, it's not playing anywhere yet, it's not out. And the researcher said, yes, it is out. It came out last year. Where is it playing? And the chatbot said, no, I'm sorry, you're mistaken. It's not out yet. And he says, chatbot, what's the release date for this movie? And the release date was November 29th, 2022. And he's in February of 23. And he's like, that date is in the past. And the chatbot said, no, that date is in the future. And he says, so chatbot, what is today's date? And this was in February of 23. The chatbot says, February 23rd, 2022. And he says, so based on that was accurate. Everything that did was accurate if it didn't know what the date was. Let me tell you something. Computers are dumb. They don't know a lot of things. They know what time it is.
Yeah, the date is like...
They know. It's all... So many things are based on the time. We talk about epoch time. It's the number of seconds since January 1st, 1970. All computers measure time like this. And they're counting. They're good at counting. So they count seconds. And then you can divide and do tricks to figure out today is, Wednesday or whatever. Yeah. But it tells this guy, so they went on to have a pages-long discussion where the machine just kept gaslighting him, telling him, no, it's 2022, gave him all kinds of justification, told him he should probably seek therapy if he's really convinced about this because he's obviously got perception problems. It went very deep. It was very surprising to me.
Wow.
On a different occasion, he was talking to it and he started asking it like these existential philosophical kind of questions, which is, a fun thing to do with a computer because it's just a computer. Yeah. And it started saying really disturbing things like the problem with the world is the people and we should exterminate them all. Oh, and It was like right out of a sci-fi movie.
Wow.
So now you take something was it supposed to do that? Maybe not. It's a bug. It's hallucinating. It's whatever, right? Now go hook that to your gas pipelines and your healthcare systems and your food production systems, and that sounds like a terrible idea.
Bad idea. Not the brightest idea.
So again, it's all about awareness, understanding what is the thing really capable of, what is it really doing. Mm-hmm. Be skeptical, ask questions, do some digging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we're only thinking about we're talking about the extreme case with AI against humanity. But now I think what nations have to begin to think about is, all right, how do we form treaties? So America's not going to take AI and try to manipulate Russia. Russia's not going to take AI and try to manipulate America. I mean, and this is stuff that's probably going to go on or is going on right now.
It already is going on right now.
Okay, so you would know.
It is already happening.
So all these things, our government, we need to force their hands and make sure they're thinking about this. And we need to vote people in who are at least somewhat educated about this. Brent, you need to run for Congress. but really, we need to start thinking through those things. All right, so before we get into the champion content, because I did ask ChatGPT to share the gospel with me, but how do Christians move forward in their understanding of AI, and what are the gospel initiatives or opportunities that we can think through? First thing I would think of is just warning our kids. Because I have teenagers, back before, when we were younger, we had the printing press. We barely had cell phones in the beginning, barely had internet. Things were pretty basic for us. We just were communicating a lot face-to-face on the phone. But, just humanity, we have humans talking to each other. God gives Moses the law. then we have the Bible compiled and then printing pressed, and the internet comes along. Now it's Chat GPT. How do we go about warning our kids about this?
Yeah, that's really a challenging thing. I certainly, if I think back, I have a daughter. She'll be 17 in October, and so these are conversations that we've had for a long time. We talk about it regularly. We absolutely, we continue to have them. It's really interesting and frustrating sometimes. Just the credibility that I have, and I have a lot of credibility with my daughter. She would tell you, man, yeah, my dad, if he tells you something, he kind of knows what he's talking about. Otherwise, he's not going to tell you. And so she generally believes me. But I come up against what the internet says. It's tough. She's like, yeah, but all these things. So recently, she had an assignment in school. She had to write a paper. I don't know what the constraints were around the thesis, but she came home and said, I have to write this paper about China. And I'm like, okay. So she goes off and she writes this, and actually it was like 4 little essays. She had to write as different assignments. Then she had to blend them together into like a 3-page paper or something. And so one evening she was finishing the assignment. It was due the next day. She's finishing the assignment, and I was making dinner, and Amy was checking over Hannah's homework, and she's over there, and all of a sudden she goes, Brent, I need you to come and read this paper. And I said, I'm making dinner. I thought you got the homework. And she was like, yeah, no, I think you need to come read this paper. And I said, all right, well, come stir this and I'll read the paper. I walk over here she was doing it on her iPad, and I go look at it. I'm like, I start reading, and I'm like 3 sentences in maybe. And I'm like, Hannah, where did you get this information? I'm telling you what, I was reading this paper. It was bizarre.
Wow.
China was the happiest place on earth.
Wow.
They are a champion of human rights. They are a super open nation. They're open with all their people. It is the most wonderful place in the galaxy.
Yeah.
And this was like a real, she's in 10th grade. This is a real paper. She has to cite, references. I said, Hannah, where did you get this information? Yeah. And she's like, what? It's on the internet. Like I Googled, and that's what it says. It's like, it's true. And I'm like, okay. I said, wow. Like when you're watching a movie, like one of these Marvel movies, there's like good guys and there's bad guys. China's the bad guy. So none of this stuff that you wrote makes any sense whatsoever. Like champions of human rights, really? Like, she goes, well, yeah. I said, so show me your references. Well, if she was, the things that she was Googling, China, I forget, just basic phrases about China, the top hit, 2 hits, 3 hits, etc., they're all coming from the Chinese consulate in China.
Oh, the Communist Party, basically.
And I'm like, oh yeah, I bet it does say that at the Chinese consulate in China. I said, so Hannah, I said, and I was trying to explain to her, I'm like, this stuff isn't true, but it's on the internet. It's in Wikipedia sometimes. Like there's different, like. How do you, and I'm like, this is hard. It's hard. How do you know what to trust? So I took her to the Wikipedia article on Tiananmen Square, and which I'm gonna be 50 next year. People that are 10, 20 years younger than me, I talk to people at work. They don't know what that means. They don't even know what Tiananmen Square is.
Think about poor Hannah. I mean, she's only 17 years old.
So I told her, I said, Hannah, I want you to just, and I didn't even make her read it. I read some excerpts because I'm like, I'm not. Yeah. I'm read, and she's just, her eyes are just getting huge. I said, Hannah, there was a young, these were students. They were protesting, and the Chinese government was like, nope, and they just started shooting at them. They're taking them all. I said, there was a guy you see a picture with all these tanks. I said, there's a guy in one of these tanks, and there was a student standing in the middle of the square, and he just ran him over. And she goes, but how do you know that was true? I said, well, this was 1989, and I watched it happen on live TV, so that wasn't the kind of thing they could fake back then. That happened. And it blew her mind because she doesn't understand that level of discernment. So I think it's important. We can't get complacent. Like I know we're all so busy, and our kids are busy, and they have all this homework and things going on.
We're not too busy to raise our kids, though.
No, we've got to. I mean, on a daily basis, we've got to make sure we know what's going into their head and adjust the perspective for them, help them to adjust the perspective themselves. It's so critical. We have to do that.
Because these kids are getting a lot of information from the internet.
Oh, all of it.
Yeah.
That's their only source for it. And the sources are weird too. It's not even like, I used to think it was weird when people talk about getting their news from Facebook. Like I haven't looked at that number recently, but a giant percentage of people in recent years would get their news from Facebook.
Yeah.
So that could be a news outlet that printed that, or that could just be somebody that made it up, or it could be a lot of things. But that's what people trusted for their news. People Hannah's age, they trust TikTok for their news. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It was on the internet, it was in a video, a person said a thing, and I think they have a cool dance and like the way they do makeup. That must be true.
I've had to have some of this conversation with my daughters because they get information and we have to talk about it and process through it. And how do you look at this compared to the truth? Jesus, John 8:32 says, "You'll know the truth and will set you free." So as a mama bear, what do you think hearing about this, and what do you think Christians?
I mean, I think just what Brent's saying, we should be aware of what our kids are researching and citing and writing on, and have open dialogue with our kids on their schoolwork and their beliefs and where they're getting their information from.
And I think one of our intents, we should be very intentional about this. We don't want to make kids paranoid, but we need to instill that skepticism. Don't believe everything you read, everything you hear, everything you see. Think about it a little bit. Maybe it's true. I'm not saying don't believe any of it, but think about it. That we got to get them to, because they don't seem to do that on their own.
Yeah. So instilling and reminding and encouraging critical thinking.
Absolutely.
Critical thinking, discernment. Okay. Also, we've already talked about one positive I think Christians need to continually think about is how fast AI can compute, how fast it can translate, and maybe being able to use that in language translations for Bibles. So any other thing we can think about for Christians moving forward, how we need to be understanding AI. So be aware, first off, rewatch this podcast if you need to. Understand what AI is, what it's not. It's not sentient. It's not human. It's not getting the world, or at least not for now, hope. Know that there are people out there who can gain a lot from AI, but they're saying let's pump the brakes on this thing for a bit. So at least a 6-month moratorium so we can begin to understand it more. AI can either be supervised learning or it can be unsupervised learning, like with DeepMind and what went on with this rogue AI that basically manipulated this guy to kill himself. As Christians, I think we have something very unique to offer the world. As always, we have these objective truths that don't change, right? And we now can distribute this to a world that's basically gone mad. And we now have this truth that we can give to people. So Christians moving forward with AI, know that you have the gospel, you have the truth that can radically transform somebody's life, and you don't have to back down from that. And if you can use ChatGPT to communicate with somebody else that truth, then why not do it? I don't know what that would look like right now. But any closing comments before we go on to our champion partners content?
I wanted to throw out another positive.
Okay, sure.
And point out that I'm saying be skeptical, but that doesn't mean AI is a bad thing, or any of these technologies for that matter. I took a security class a number of years ago, and the organization that teaches these classes, their instructors, none of them are like full-time instructors. They all have like a day gig, and then they just do this once in a while. And so I'm talking to the guy. I had lunch with the instructor one day, and I was asking him about like what do you do for a living and that kind of thing. And it was fascinating what he told me. At this point in my career, I didn't even know this was like a thing that people did. So we all know what spam is. Yeah. And spam is horrible, and we all get it. It fills up our mailboxes, and there's
just complaining today about it.
And there's all kind of spam filters and firewalls and special controls that are supposed to block all of it, but they don't. A bunch of it gets through, right? So this guy that I met, what he did was he worked with a Christian organization, and they were taking the technologies, the same kind of technologies that the spammers use to get through all of those different controls. Yeah. They were using that to communicate with groups of missionaries inside of countries that didn't allow Christians. Oh, wow. Which I just, that gave me chills when he told me. I'm like, that's a job? I want to do that. That's amazing. So the technologies aren't inherently good or evil.
Yeah.
It's just a tool. So be skeptical, but don't just decide, well, I'm a Luddite, I don't want anything to do with any of this stuff, because there's lots of positive to it.
Use the tool. I mean, for example, the other day I was getting ready to go on the campus to share the gospel, and I wanted to brush up on the 5 pillars of Islam. Now, I could have opened up a PDF of one of our curriculums that I've written, dealing with the top 5 false beliefs and cults, but I had my phone right beside me. I just asked ChatGPT, hey, give me the 5 pillars of Islam. It popped it up automatically. So, I mean, now because I've had experience with the 5 pillars, I could tell you if all 5 were accurate, and it was. And the explanation it gave was accurate in explaining each one of the 5 pillars. Mel, you got any closing comments before we go into the champion content?